Collide, featuring your distinguished host and certified financial planner, Bart Zandbergen.
Welcome to the show for dream chasers and wealth makers. I'm thrilled to be back in the show today. Thanks, Paul, for queuing us up. I appreciate it.
Always. And you bringing back a guest we haven't seen here in a while.
You know, he's the best, and I'm so excited to have him here today. So it's Harley, the owner of the ERISA law firm. Welcome, Harley, to the show.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be back.
So I wanted just to share a couple things about Harley. He's absolutely amazing, and when it has anything to do with ERISA, I want you guys to think of Harley. He is my go-to guy. So he has an amazing amount of experience. He owns his own firm, and he has drafted so many retirement plans. He has extensive experience of administrating and operating retirement plans, working with third-party administrators, and also members of benefit committees. So when I say benefits, I'm talking about benefits for small business, medium-sized business, large businesses. So today is really about we have a lot of people who are on our show that listen in, and today is really about business owners and how we can really help either take you in the direction of creating a retirement plan of your dreams, if it's creating benefits for them, or if it's whatever it's important to you. So I want to
now before you jump any further, I know you're ready to dive into this subject like you always do with great knowledge. What the heck is ERISA? Half the people don't even know.
Harley, please tell us what ERISA is.
I always give my patented response, which ERISA stands for every ridiculous idea since Adam. Actually, it stands for the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, but that's not really important. It's really like a foreign language. When people say they need ERISA, that's usually they're talking about me, and I'm an ERISA lawyer, and I'm glad you started with business, Letitia, because that's really the big issue for me. I start with business. I think the best thing that happened to me in my career is I've spent 40 years practicing just in this area, but more than 20 of that has been with very, very large law firms. And in that place, I always ran the benefit plans, the healthcare plans and the retirement plans and any executive comp. So I was a consumer of my own wares, if I would, and that really helped me to get an insight into what is really something that you as a business person should look at, not necessarily the concept of ERISA allows this or ERISA doesn't allow that. It's really more, what are our business goals? What are we trying to achieve? What kind of behavior are we trying to get out of our employees? And that's really what I focus on mostly.
I love that. And it's so great because you not only wear the hat as a business owner and have the experience, you also you can guide and coach them along the way. So I think that this is a fantastic kind of segue to ask is, when do people seek you out, Harley? At what point do they say, we need you?
Well, I look at myself as a translator. It's like you're going to Germany and you're doing a deal in Germany, but you don't speak the language. You need to have someone that can translate it for you.
Right.
And what I try to do is the technical stuff, we can work that out. There's lots of technicians that work in these plans, your third-party administrator or your insurance company, if it's a healthcare plan or whatever else. My role is typically whenever you reach a bump, and those bumps can be reached in a lot of different places. It's either growth of the business, shrinking of the business. Sometimes it's expansion of the business. Sometimes it's buying a company. Sometimes it's selling a company. But ultimately what I try to do is I try to educate the owner of the business. What are the 5 or 6 things that I need to worry about here? And that's really what I try to do is whenever someone says you need an ERISA attorney, you better call one because, and I'll use a perfect example.
Yes.
One of my biggest problems is that most companies in Orange County in particular have a 401k plan. And
right.
do you know how those plans are designed?
Well,
let me answer that
basically,
for you.
Go into depth here.
Most of the time what happens is you have a salesperson from the third-party administration company that sits down with someone from HR. It might be an HR director. It might be someone who's just serving that function for the owner of the business. But they'll sit down and they'll decide, what's the eligibility? What's the vesting? What's all this stuff? And they'll design the plan basically like that. And what ends up happening is you've
filling in the blanks.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of plans that are exactly the same, but they don't necessarily serve the same kind of businesses. For example, you might have one business that's a restaurant and another one that's a manufacturing plant and another that's a law firm. And I can't think of 3 businesses that are more completely different and need completely different designs than that.
So what you're saying is there's a lot of cookie cutter plans, which I see out there. Tell me, people relate to stories. So if there's some examples, maybe you can show with some large companies and some small companies and how you've been able to draft some of these to make them great for their company.
There's been many circumstances over the years. I mean, one of my favorite examples, and I love clients like this because they come to you with a puzzle. Originally, I had a client that came to me and they had a 35% turnover in their employees. Now and this is a company with 5,000 employees, so it wasn't a small company, and this is a massive amount of turnovers. Right. And what happens in their industry is they have a lot of very well-educated people that have figured out if you stay at your job, you get a 2% raise, and you don't make much money. If you jump at the end of the year, you get a $30,000 raise, and then you jump again 2 years later, you get another $30,000 raise. So they have massive turnover, and they wanted to stop that. It was costing them close to $8 or $9 million a year in turnover and retraining and everything else. Yeah. So it was interesting because they came to me, they wanted to teach their employees what a concept called EBITDA is. And it's really just a fancy way of saying the real profitability of the business. But what they were getting employees to do is focus on how does my department make this company more profitable? And so we went through a process and we worked together to try to train the employees. But what I did, and I asked them this, and this is really my focus. I said, well, what's your real goal in this? And they said, God, we got to get this turnover addressed. And so
wait 1 second. I want to make sure that everyone hears that. What you did is you asked the owner, what's the true problem? And then you worked out a solution. Sorry, go ahead, continue. I want to make sure they hear that.
My first question is always, why are you doing this? And really that's what it came down to. They were trying to create a better, more profitable thing. And they weren't really thinking in terms of the retirement plan, but I was. So immediately what I said is why don't we do this? And so we proposed, and most 401k plans have some sort of a match, either it's a safe harbor or something, but we had a discretionary match. And I said, why don't we do a discretionary match? And they go, well, how's that going to help us? And so what I did is I told them, look, we're going to teach them what EBITDA is. And what we'll do is that whatever percentage of EBITDA the company and the employees achieve for that year, that's the same percentage match we'll do.
Hold on 1 second. Before you elaborate, you go into detail what it is. Can you define that for the audience? Because they don't even know what that is.
I don't want you to get bogged down in EBITDA because this isn't about that. And this is one of those things I try not to do. EBITDA is something that considers the profitability of the company, taking out tax write-offs like your rent and things that don't necessarily go into the costs of things going on. And so what they're doing is they're just focusing on some of the core elements of the business to figure out profitability. So if you have 100% of EBITDA, you've done well. And that's exactly what they were trying to do. Well, in the first year of this program, they did a 97% of EBITDA for the company. And they were absolutely thrilled. But what we did, and here's the tricky part that ties back into a retirement plan, is we did a match, and we announced this at the beginning of the year. We will match the same percentage of your elective deferrals that you put into the plan, your $10,000 to $15,000 that you're putting in every year, and we'll match that exact same percentage that the company does. They did 97%. And that meant everybody was getting virtually a dollar for dollar match on their 401k plan, and they were happy. But here's the twist, and there's where Harley comes in. Because it's a discretionary match, we said, no, you only get this match, one, if we hit that 97%, but also, and they had a calendar year end, you have to stay employed until July 31st of the next year, or you forfeit the entire match. They went from a 35% turnover to a 2% turnover in 1 year. And this is just an example of how when you focus on the goals and you focus on the amount of money that you're spending on this stuff, and by the way, this match that they put up, I think the number that they actually spent was $1.5 million, but they were losing $10 million a year on this turnover. So they're way ahead of the game. And that's really a point when you get smart about what you do, you can build a better mousetrap.
See, I love that, because what you're doing is you're using your tools and you're being creative and you're thinking outside of the box to really give the employees an incentive to stay longer. The business owners are happy because they're more profitable and everyone has higher morale and they're staying there longer. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, well, it is. And it's why you want to have a business approach to this. And it doesn't matter what benefit you have. I mean, you look at what's happening in the benefits world. It's getting to be very, very expensive as rent. I mean, after the coronavirus, it may be more expensive. But ultimately, when you're spending that kind of money, why not spend it smart? What I try to do is create incentives that are they make the employees happy and they keep the employees at their jobs. But more importantly, they produce a positive business result for the company that allows it to achieve its goals and move forward.
Well, and that's fantastic. Everyone wins, right? At the end of the day, and that's exactly the goal. So, and even if they maybe don't hit those targets that year, now they have an incentive to hit it next year and everyone's more motivated.
And you can always build on it. You can always do or take away, and there's always different ways to do it. But, that's the one problem that I have in most situations. When you're working with a typical third-party administrator, this might be someone that's been on the job for 5 or 6 years. Well, I've spent 40 years working on these plans. In fact, I drafted one of my first 401k plans in 1987, which was a few years ago. So, I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I have so many better outlooks on what you can and cannot do with respect to these plans and how do you make yourself successful. And this is true whether you're a small plan or a big plan. I'd like to use another example. I think
please.
one of the most common thing. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
No, please give me another example. I love stories. This is good.
One of the most common things that happen is most people that dabble in qualified retirement plans, they know there's two sexes of retirement plans. There's defined contribution plans, which are like your profit sharing plans or your 401k plans or those types of things, where you have a basically $50,000, $60,000 maximum contribution. But there's also a defined benefit plan. And a defined benefit plan, sometimes for the right situations, you can put as much as $250,000 to $300,000 away a year for each of the key people in the business. And what most people think is that in order to do that, it's really expensive because just to put this 250 away for, say, a one corporation owner, they think they're going to have to put in, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 for everybody else. But actually, what it comes down to is a much cheaper number. When we examine these kinds of programs where you put in a defined benefit plan for the owner and a 401k plan for the rank and file employees, it runs about 7.5% to 10% of payroll to give the owner that big contribution of $250,000, $300,000, and then 7.5% to 10% of pay to cover the rest of the people. And this alone is one of the things that's really not well understood. We see a lot of people, doctors in particular, professionals that like to get their own corporation and work for a partnership and pretend like they're not part of a control group. Well, they probably are. But see, there are ways to do these things legally because they have a lot of rules under ERISA that pigs get fed and hogs get slaughtered. So if you're going to be a hog, you're not going to get the benefit. But if you want to share some of the wealth with the rank and file employees, it's amazing some of the things you can do financially. You really can create opportunities that are not nearly as expensive as most people think.
Yeah. And, to be honest, I bring this up with a lot of my clients and at first they're very confused. They don't really understand, like you said, and they think it's very expensive. And at the end of the day, they're like, this is amazing because they win, their employees are happy, and they're closer to reaching their own retirement goals because they're able to put away a lot more faster. So it's a great, great tool. So I'm so glad you talked about it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about like an ESOP or phantom stocks of some of the bigger companies and how you can make it creative and fun.
Well, those are both items, and I would like to talk about both. And I want to start with ESOPs. ESOPs are employee stock ownership plans, which the keynote provision of those is that they can own up to 100% of the company. So it's employee-owned businesses. And by far the biggest thing, the world of ESOPs has changed radically. When you go back in the 80s and 90s, probably 70-80% of my practice was about ESOPs. And a lot of that was because there weren't a lot of people that work in the area. Now there are tons and tons of people, and it's almost become a commodity. But the most important thing to see about an ESOP is that there's a lot of factors that make a big difference. So, for example, if you have a client that it's a bunch of architects or engineers, these are educated people that understand things like equity ownership and what it means. And so those types of business will do much better than, say, a landscaping company where you have a high level of Hispanics.
Right.
Very, very different kinds of cultures, very, very different kinds of approaches. I mean, so you really have to pay attention to those type of things in ESOPs. And a lot of what we do today is it's a lot cheaper than you think to run some of these scenarios, but to look at how they work, and they do work in many, many situations. They provide a tremendous outcome. And I've got examples, but I'll tell you what, I could do a whole show on ESOPs. I'd rather shift over to something that's very popular today, which is the phantom stock plan.
All right, let's do it.
We all know about the dot-com bubble, and what happened in the dot-com bubble is what we did in the 80s and 70s and 90s. is we gave stock to people, and people got stock, and then the company went public or got acquired, and that was the big payday for everyone. So they had the stock. Now, what everyone didn't realize is that the federal and state securities laws restrict when you can sell that stock. So many people became multimillionaires on the conversion date, whether it was a sale or
overnight.
But by the time they could sell the stock in 2 years, all of their profits were gone and they had nothing. And so it really created a lashback. And what's really happened is, culturally, what's happened is no one's looking for stock anymore. And I mean, I'll tell you, I've put in maybe 2 stock options in the last 10 years, whereas I would do 2 stock options a day for most companies. Today, what they're all doing is phantom stock. And what phantom stock is it's an equity-based measurement situation. But really what it means is it's a cash bonus that's paid on a transaction, which is either going public, big refinancing, sale of the business, or those type of things, and it triggers a cash bonus that's payable immediately. Good news is you get all the cash. Bad news is you got to pay a tax on it. But at least people are getting out of Dodge, and net of taxes, they're able to walk away with a decent amount of money. Right. Now, what these phantom stocks do is they typically can use, and really they're just measurement driven. I have some companies that actually hire a company to create a value for the business, and it's based on that. So, for example, if you create a stock option a phantom stock plan in 2020, and the company's worth $100, what you do is you tell someone, I'll give you 10% of the increase in the value of the company. So in 2040, when the company's gone up to $200 in value, what happens is the person gets a 10% bonus of that $200, or they get a $20 bonus.
Right.
And that's effectively what happens when the company goes public or it sales. They pay a $20 bonus. And there's lots of different scenarios that you can use. And what a lot of people focus on is, how does this work, and when do I pay it, and what do they care about? I don't go there. What I really go about is I start with, what are your business goals? And most of the time, the goal is, I've got this key person or these key 5 or 6 people, and I want to keep them there, and I don't want them to leave. Right. So that's one. It's called golden handcuffs. I want to keep them at their desk. Well, how do you do that? You got to get their attention. You got to have something that's dangling over them that if they leave, they lose it. Right. And that's what we do with these phantom stock plans, is we create this value that's sitting in front of them, and they realize they've got to take the business to that transaction, or they're going to lose the money. And so that's one aspect for it. And then the other aspect of it is, the guy doesn't want to give away too much. The owner of the business doesn't want to give away too much. So they might, and so what ends up happening is, we typically look at this in terms of, let's do a formula. And if the formula is such that it comes true, so it triples the value of the business, this person's getting triple the value of the business. So they've got to be happy with that. Well, let's take some portion of that and throw it back to these 5 or 6 key people that got you there. And so we create this type of system. And most of these systems don't operate in a vacuum. I know so many lawyers that draft these plans and then disappear. They just never look at it again. I'm always wanting to meet with a client, and especially around valuation time, because if you've gone from 100 to 120 this year, everybody gets to see they just got a bump in the value, a 20% bump in the value of their benefit. And this is the whole point. You push this, put this in front of them. I'm surprised at how much money people spend on benefit plans, and they don't do anything to toot their own horns. Healthcare. Healthcare is a perfect example. The subsidy that an employer pays on healthcare is sometimes 70, 80, 90% of the cost. And yet they don't even tell the employees. The employees say, how can I pay COBRA of $1,200 a month when I only pay $100 a month for the plan? Well, you only pay $100 a month for the plan because the company's subsidizing $1,100 of it.
Exactly.
Nobody touts that. That's the stuff that you can do a better job of creating a better employment environment for people and make them feel appreciated, make them understand stuff. And more importantly, when you have to do stuff like raise how much they have to pay or pay more or get better plans or different plans,
communicate it.
It's easier to sell. It's a partnership. We're working together to do this. It's not just me. So many employers don't bother to tell their employees how much it costs them for healthcare, how much it costs them for the 401k plan or whatever kind of plan they have.
Yeah, no, it's so true. So I know that we're kind of running out of time, but I want to make sure, did you want to address any other health and wellness plan options that you've seen in your experience? I know we're going through all of it really fast.
Yeah, we're covering stuff, and we're covering a little bit. I like to hit the highlights. One of the big things that's really hit smaller business recently is Obamacare. Yeah. And remember that Obamacare has been radically changed by the Trump administration. The main thing that they did is, under Obamacare, you had to either get health plan or you had to pay a penalty. Yeah. Okay. And that happened for the first couple of years, and then the Trump administration got rid of it. But that stuff's not there anymore. But what is there is still this concept of affordable healthcare. And what affordable healthcare means is that no U.S. citizen should have to pay in excess of, and I think it's 9.87 something % of their earnings to get healthcare. And when you have to spend more than that, the federal government gives you a subsidy that is a tax credit, which is the best kind of a deal, a tax credit, because that's giving you a dollar for dollar reduction in your healthcare. Now, this doesn't apply in situations where you're with a company that has 50 or more employees. It used to be 100, it's now 50. But what happens is if you have a company that has that many employees, they have to offer affordable care, which is this 9.7% of pay, to all of their employees. And that healthcare can't just be some really, only high deductible and only hospitalizations or serious things are covered. It's got to be a reasonable kind of coverage. But if you don't get offered that, then you'll be available for the subsidy. And this is what's important. If you're an employer that has 50 or more employees and you're not giving that, guess what? If they take a subsidy, you got to pay it. So they're hitting companies with tax liabilities. And I want to use a real common example, which actually really happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. I have a client that's a restaurant, and restaurants struggle with this all the time. And, I mean, this is even pre-COVID, they were struggling. And what they were trying to do is offer this benefit. And what they did is they offered a benefit that met all their criteria. It had all the coverages that were necessary, and it was more than 9.7% the employer subsidy. And so they offered it to all their employees. But what happened is they had many employees that had kids and families and things like that. And they said, God, to get your coverage, it cost me $100 a month. If I go onto the website, the Obama website, I can get the same thing for $50. So they were going out and getting it for $50. Now, what happened here is that neither side really understood what was going on, because what happens with the employer is every employee that they have, they report to the government, we're offering this healthcare plan and we're paying this subsidy. And so they report it to the government. If the government checks it and it's all okay, everything's okay. But if anyone that is working for them goes to the Obamacare website and gets coverage and gets a credit, then the IRS will audit you. And they used to audit you by saying, hey, we're looking into this and we think you owe these things. I saw clients getting $600,000-$700,000 worth of penalties.
Wow.
This one was $898,000 worth of penalties. And what happened is it was completely, you had to pay it first and then make a motion to try to get it back from them.
Wow.
And what turned out in this situation is that this person had, a couple hundred employees, but 150 of them went to the website and got the cheaper healthcare, not knowing that they were shooting themselves in the foot. So the employees got screwed, the employer got screwed. And to make a long story short, it's really important that you focus on this. Work with your brokers. And by the way, when you buy healthcare, you buy it through a broker. That broker is there for you. They work for you. Make them work. Make them educate your people what it means if you don't take this healthcare coverage. And they should counsel each person, have them sign papers that show, yes, I was offered this, and yes, I declined this. Because if you have that, I mail in to the IRS and say, we offered this. Here's all their signatures. Here's the people that looked up and got the credit. You go after them. Leave my client alone.
Right.
And it's very important that you pay attention to this. It's not something that's willy-nilly anymore. We're seeing more and more of this where these clients are getting big, huge, tax liability bills from the IRS.
Right. Yeah, that's so unfortunate. Well, I know we're out of time, but I have one last question for you. But I want to say a couple things before I ask you the last question is, I know we covered a lot and you've informed us so many great plans, and you just did over just the surface of all these great things. But what I want them to know is how they can find you, and knowing that you are such a great wealth of knowledge and all of your experience over the years, that these plans, they're not so bad and they're not scary. And we work with you to help get it done so that it's, they're taken care of and you're on their side. You're walking them through it. You're making sure they understand, and they're asking the questions, what's going to work for you? Not everyone does that. So, I mean, that alone is huge.
Actually, a better way to say that, Letitia, is most people don't do that.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. It's a waste of money, in my opinion.
And that's why I think that you're so great at what you do. Because again, it's not just about you, it's about the client and how what's going to work for them and their business needs and their goals. So I love that. Last question I'm going to ask is, what's your ultimate lesson learned? It can be personally, it can be business, just in general. We ask every person who is on the show.
Well, it's funny because I knew this was coming, and I knew I would have to say something like this, but I will tell you what I tell all of my business colleagues.
Okay.
I'm 64 years old, and the 100 best days of my life, not one of them has anything to do with work.
Huh.
And I hope that'll illustrate things for most people, because when you understand that and you use that as your motivation, you can order your life around it. I take my job seriously. I take my clients seriously. I take their needs seriously, and I represent them passionately and aggressively. And in all those things that I do, and I take great joy out of that, none of these come close to my 3 adult daughters and my 2 grandchildren. And my wife. I gotta mention her too.
Yeah, exactly. It's so great. Well, Harley, how can people find you? Can you throw up your number, your email, some way that people can reach you?
The best way is to go get on the internet, and I name my firm the ERISA Law Firm because that's easy to remember. If you can remember ERISA, which is every ridiculous idea since Adam, it's theerisalawfirm.com. It's got all my information there. I even have a service there where I answer questions when people send stuff in. But ultimately, most of this stuff, work with your people like Letitia, and work with your advisors, because ultimately they're going to get you to people like myself.
Yep.
And that's the best way to get us, because we're very specialized in what we do. But see, that specialty gives us this incredible ability to look into your business and see what you're doing. I mean, I haven't worked with every kind of company, but I've worked with most kinds of companies, and a lot of it has common business goals, and that's really what we work to. And you'll see that. And I'm always willing to give estimates, because the hourly amount that a lawyer charges is nothing. What really matters is where they bring the project in. I'm pretty good about that kind of stuff, and I'm always willing to work with people on that.
So great. Well, thank you, Harley, for being on the show today. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can email me at letitia@optivestinc.com, and I can answer any of your questions. And I will, if you have questions for Harley, I can also point you the direction directly to Harley.
Let me give them my email, because that's just as easy. It's Harley, HARLEY @theerisalawfirm.com. Pretty easy to remember.
Perfect.
And Letitia, thank you so much for this opportunity. Really enjoyed it. I'll come back. Last time I did this, I had to come back because people had all kinds of questions, but we can do that. We can figure that out later.
Yeah, I love that. So great. Well, so Paul, are you still there?
I'm here. I'm just writing down all this information here and everything. It's one of those topics that just doesn't get discussed enough, and I don't know why.
Sure.
I don't know.
Now, Paul, I want to make sure you know the title of our show is Employee Benefits Made Easy, and it truly is. And he just went over just the high level of all of the great employee benefits, or just some, not even all, but how he was able to explain them very simply.
Yeah. Well, that's
my job. I'm a translator.
Exactly. All right. Good stuff, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Tune in next week for the latest edition of the Zandbergen Report, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Catch up on our recent shows by visiting bartzandbergen.podbean.com. The Zandbergen Report is also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Interested in being a featured guest on our show, or have a question you'd like to hear us answer? Email podcast@bartzandbergen.com. Bart A. Zandbergen, CFP, and Letitia Burbaum, AIF, are registered investment advisors with Optivest Inc. and registered representatives with Gramercy Securities Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered by Optivest Inc. under SEC registration.